My next supporting detail, which can have an impact on these players, is the living conditions they're met with when they enter the league. These players live in cramped living conditions with teammates whom they have never met. This can lead to language barriers between players they have never met before and overall isolating factors which can really weigh on a player's mental stability. Um, Being cramped with people you never met can be uncomfortable, and this can lead to conflict among teammates and themselves. My next supporting detail is at the beginning of esports inception. Esports was not a sustainable lifestyle with an income like it is today. With prizes split among whole organizations, not even the most winning of teams could sustain themselves with an income that's able to buy a house, car, and live off of. Uh, Unlike today, where players are given a salary and an opportunity to at least support themselves from different contracts being smaller or larger than others, most players seem to be able to support themselves. Um, but the history aspect of my essay tells a time where that wasn't always possible, and these players seem to have it made compared to the ones in the past that couldn't support themselves. And this point was overall meant to highlight that things, in retrospect, are getting better for these players, but there's an underlying factor that still has an effect on their mental. My next supporting detail is the language barriers that these players can encounter when joining a professional league. Esports players come from all different regions across the world, hoping to live out their dream. A large majority of esports players are from Europe and Asia and leave their homes to come play in American esports leagues. These players abandon their homes and soon realize that an esports environment is not suitable for everyone for long periods of time. Being alone in a foreign country, apart from family and familiar environment, alienates these players to a degree which not many other professionals really undergo. Most athletes have a time. Most athletes have a time to enjoy their possessions and their time away from the game, but many of these players don't have time to relax and would rather just practice instead and remain in isolation. And I think this overall could be a huge factor in a reason they become unhappy with their career. Now, my counter arguments that are brought up against people who say these players face a struggle with depression or mental illness comes from the comparison of other athletes. All professional athletes travel throughout their seasons away from their families on birthdays and holidays. Why is it that pro players are not able to handle their stress the way other athletes do? To compare the alienation an esports player undergoes to that of an NFL or NBA player isn't always a 1-to-2 comparison, as many of these players were born and raised in the countries they play in, such as NBA stars coming right from colleges, within the United States, NFL players coming from many of the big colleges as well. These players come from across the world, and this creates language barriers between European, Asian, American, and Spanish players, just to name, the four major regions where these players come from. Another difference is the age between the average age between NFL players and esports players isn't a 1-to-2 comparison either, as many of those players in professional leagues that we're used to are more so adults, to whereas as soon as these players turn 18 in esports leagues, they're eligible to play. And, a young foreign 18-year-old coming to the United States might struggle a lot more than an American raised college student trying to adjust to the NFL.